Hello everybody, I'm Alexey Krabrov, the organizer of SF Scala, SF Spark, and SF Hadoop meetups, including others. And here we're on location at Orange, Silicon Valley. This is our first time at Orange. It has a research lab here. And we have a great meetup tonight. We have a talk about Apache Druid, and we have a talk about Scalameta work, which Max Ovsankin, who is our speaker, did with the Twitter language group. And Max will talk about it today. So welcome, Max.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. So first of all, tell us a little bit about your career in computer science. You've interned at Nitro earlier, I remember that, and now you're at Berkeley. So how did you get into this whole field, and what have you done so far?
Yeah, sure. I guess I started programming pretty early in high school, or I guess that's when I started programming with Java.
Mm-hmm.
I actually started, if you know this game Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
The game with like blocks and you kind of like assemble them. It's a really fun game. That's actually how I started programming. I just made Java modifications to it.
Okay.
And they have like a pretty vibrant open source community around like making Minecraft mods. And that was how I got into open source and got introduced to this concept and like just contributing to open source software.
Interesting.
So that happened all before I knew about the existence of Scala.
How old were you when you started doing this?
It was around the time, I don't know, I made my GitHub account in like November 2011, I think.
Okay.
So I was maybe 13 when I started all that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that was a while ago now. But yeah, I mean, that's how I really got started.
Cool.
I learned about Scala when I don't remember what iteration it was, but it was Odersky's course.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just interested, to like learn another programming language. And I fell down this rabbit hole of functional programming. And here I am. Like every internship I did, actually for my first internship I did, I worked at like a startup that was doing Scala. And then I worked at Salesforce, which was doing Scala, and then I worked at Twitter, which was doing Scala.
Right.
So I kind of stayed with Scala because I just enjoy programming with it, and it's an interesting challenge every time. And it's unfortunate that Berkeley doesn't have, I go to Berkeley and study computer science there. They don't really have like a great functional programming like class, but I was able to take like the programming languages class and kind of deepen my knowledge there. Yeah. So
interesting. I mean, we all know that Spark came from AmpLab.
Yes.
Which is like the hallmark of functional programming for data. So I know they rebranded as RiseLab, right? And they do like more native.
Yes,
right?
Yes, this is true. Yeah, I mean, you can still see the influence now because even in the introductory courses, they teach Spark. Maybe not with Scala, at least with Python, because Python is easier for people to get started with. But yeah, it's still very much there.
So I'm curious, so you did Java before. Did you learn about Scala from JVM, in the context of JVM? Like, do you recall how you came into knowledge of all this wonderful functional programming world?
I think my first exposure to functional programming was not through the JVM. It was doing this amazing textbook called Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs by Sussman and someone else.
Yes.
And this was a textbook on Scheme.
Yes.
So that was like a really enlightening experience for me to just see a textbook that so clearly explains the foundations of programming. So then when I knew functional programming existed, that's when I just saw, how can I try to apply this in what I'm doing? And then that's when I came across Scala. So I wouldn't, Scala wasn't my first kind of exposure to functional programming, but I would say that's definitely like the one that has been most applicable for me because there's not a lot of shops, that run Scheme right now.
That's right. That's right. Although I found that Lisp is coming back in various forms like Clojure.
Yes, of course.
And there is a blockchain startup, Cadena, which built smart contract language, which is actually Lisp implemented in Haskell. And it looks like, Lisp, so I think it will be living forever, for like X expressions. Interesting. So yeah, I remember at Nitro we discussed internship and like we had to get a special dispensation from HR because you were not yet
18, yes.
And so, like there's a whole labor laws involved in this. So, but Nitro was a Scala shop, and obviously Salesforce is a strong place for Scala. And Twitter. So I'm just curious, right? Like you're as an intern, you come to these new organizations, right? So what do you find? It's like what connects them? What's special about places which use Scala. Like what can you say about the developers? Did you find any patterns? Did you find any kind of common traits among the people who use Scala?
Yeah. I think it draws, just the fact that you're using Scala draws very interesting kinds of programmers. Like people who are maybe interested in programming for the craft of it. I definitely noticed those people a lot more just at the Scala shops that I was working at. Like people who were really passionate about about programming. Yeah, more so than just as an end to like create some kind of product, right? They were actually very involved in like what a language should look like, or like just how to make the programming experience better for people. Like that's what I noticed, and that was like what really attracted me and kind of made me stay there. Is like just having that kind of community there. I can't really comment. I can't really compare because I've never worked in a non-Scala shop, so I can't really compare what it is outside. I could just compare with my university experience.
No, it's good for you, right? Like, I think you're very lucky, right? Like, we're lucky being in Silicon Valley, being in San Francisco, but we can actually get these experiences, right, with all these companies around us. So does this approach, kind of thoughtful approach to software engineering, does it extend to, for instance, DevOps? Did you get to deploy the code you worked on? Did you like see how the whole stack works, or did you work only like on a niche, like part of this whole picture? Yeah,
definitely depends on the company, right? I think when I worked at the Scala startup, I helped them. I wrote like a Slack bot for deployment. And that deployed some of my own code as well.
Okay.
I was more involved in the DevOps side there because they give it to the intern because that will just help them. I think for companies where there's kind of more of a process for deployment, like it's like Salesforce and Twitter. I think it's probably good that they didn't let me touch any of that just for their own safety. But I still at least got to see just from talking with people, and I was able to deploy code just in different formats. I think at both Salesforce and Twitter, my main contributions in terms of deployment have not been like running software systems, just deployment in terms of like an open source project or like some kind of library. That's where the main impact I've been able to make is.
Cool. So you're third year undergrad at Berkeley. And obviously, some people dropped out of college, like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, and so obviously, like Peter Thiel advocates, dropping out of college and paying people to do that. Of course,
I see people walking around with the Thiel Fellowship shirts all the time.
Yes.
On my campus.
I worked in my early startup. I worked with one of the like first year cohort graduates. So obviously that works for some people, and you're pursuing an undergrad degree in computer science. I think it's amazing. We have Berkeley, like it's a great luxury. But obviously there are all these startup opportunities, and you've been exposed to them, right? Yeah. So some people basically go and they strike it lucky, and they're founders and unicorns and stuff like that. So what's your feeling, right? Like you've seen startups, you've seen big companies. What's your motivation to pursue your undergrad degree? What's advantageous, in like a full 4-year degree at Berkeley? Do you plan to go to grad school after that? Like, what's your thinking about this?
Yeah, this question actually came up at the end of every single summer, because my experience in working is that it's qualitatively different than being at school. At school, at least the way I do school, it's stressful. There's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of deadlines.
Yep.
There's a lot of the work kind of never stops.
Yes.
So it's definitely much more fun to be in industry. So then every time I came to that question of like, what is the reason why I'm staying at school? And I think it's like the conclusion I came to is that school is a really good place for me to just develop myself further. Academically, of course, I can learn a lot of stuff. In Berkeley, the computer science curriculum is fantastic. Like I've been able to learn so much. And then just in terms of personal growth, just like it's a fantastic place to just meet diverse minds, right? Not just in computer science. There's people studying, even at Berkeley, even though the computer science major is huge, there are people not studying computer science.
Yes.
And I get to just interact with them, right? And I feel like it is harder to do that in industry where you're kind of in a bubble, especially in San Francisco, you're kind of in the tech bubble. You're just very much in it. It's hard to like stick outside.
Yes.
So that kind of experience, I think, has been very valuable for me. And then I guess in terms of future plans, I also discovered that I really do like just doing research, I suppose. And it was at Berkeley where I found I really liked math. And now I'm trying to, do research, teach for theoretical computer science. That's like the field I like to go into. And, I'll see what happens, right? I'll try to pursue grad school, try to go further, because it's very interesting for me to do research there. And I think the nice thing about working in this field is that at any time I can kind of, if I see I'm in a bad situation, things are not working out for me in academia, I can always go to industry. And there's plenty of very interesting, awesome opportunities to do research in industry, as I experienced, this summer and before.
Yep.
So it's definitely not a bad choice to make, but yeah, I'm still curious to just experience academia a little more and see what that's like.
That's awesome. By the way, this is the research lab. I just learned that Orange has its research lab in Silicon Valley, as do many car manufacturers, right? Like Volkswagen and Toyota, and basically a lot of companies. So I think this is amazing, and I fully agree with you. I'm looking back at my studies. I did not do the most efficiently when I was the undergrad, right? But I now think this is an amazing luxury, right? I think personally, right, looking back, it's an amazing luxury if you have time to develop yourself before you have a family or job obligation. I think, looking back, I think that's absolutely the best choice. You can learn, rigorous academic disciplines and distributed systems and theoretical computer science. All of this is available, but at the job, it's very hard to do, right? So that's really cool. So that's awesome. So the last question is basically you're attracted to the programming languages. So you worked with the Twitter language group with Eugene Burmako, which is some of the most mind-boggling and involved, code bases. So what interests you in such complicated things like Scalameta? Most people will find them hard to grok.
No, it is very hard to grok. It took me. Eugene was awesome. He kind of led me through and explained a lot of stuff to me and helped me get up to speed with how everything was going. I think I had the nice opportunity of each time I got to pick a project. And for Twitter, I wanted to go to Twitter specifically for this kind of thing. I wanted to go to Twitter specifically because Eugene was working on Scala-related tools. I think that's just an interest I've had in programming languages since forever. I used to write, I wrote Lisps that would compile to JavaScript just in my free time because I thought it was really cool.
So you did early closure script.
Yeah. Not as good, but I did a lot of that stuff. And I think, the complexity is kind of, it's a lot like research. It was research, right? I enjoy research because you really get to dig deep and have to analyze things. And it's at the point where you cannot keep the entire project you have to do in your head. It's just too complicated. And I think just having that challenge is really enjoyable. And I think that actually just motivates a lot of my decision to continue doing research or just pick the kind of work I do because it's having that challenge that's really exciting.
Cool. So, thank you very much for sharing it with us. We're looking forward to your main talk and, happy to have you in the community.
Yeah.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you so much.